Something remarkable is happening in the Pacific Ocean right now, and most people have no idea how fast it is moving. Picture this, a Tuesday morning, somewhere in the Sea of Japan, gray water, gray sky, a Japanese destroyer cutting through swells that have rolled uninterrupted across 1,000 miles of open ocean. On the aft deck sits a weapon system that looks nothing like a weapon. Two 40-foot steel containers, the kind you see stacked on cargo ships, connected by cables, humming with focused electrical energy. No barrel, no missile tube, no explosive ordnance visible anywhere. A target drone is released into the sky. Small, fast, the kind of cheap, expendable, unmanned aerial vehicle that modern militaries deploy by the hundreds. The kind that has reshaped warfare in Ukraine, in the Middle East, in every conflict zone where quantity has started defeating quality. Seconds later, a beam of invisible light, 100,000 watts of concentrated photons, focused to a point smaller than a coin, lances across the horizon at the speed of light. 186,000 miles per second. No travel time, no arc, no intercept calculation. Point and fire. The drone doesn't explode. It doesn't spiral dramatically into the sea, trailing smoke and flame. It simply stops working. Its electronics fried. Its control surfaces burned through. Dead in the air. Then falling, silently, into the water. Cost of the drone, tens of thousands of dollars. Cost of the shot that killed it, a few dollars of electricity. Welcome to the new Pacific arms race. While the world's eyes have been fixed on Ukraine and the Middle East, on artillery barrages and drone swarms and missile defense systems being overwhelmed, something tectonic is taking shape in East Asia. A triangle of strategic tension between China, Russia, and Japan has reached a point that analysts are calling the most dangerous geopolitical flashpoint on the planet. And every week, it gets a little hotter. In this breakdown, I'm going to walk you through the three forces converging in the Pacific right now, and why their convergence could produce a crisis that makes everything happening in Europe and the Middle East look like a prelude. I'm going to show you what China is building across the Taiwan Strait, the missile arsenals, the invasion infrastructure, the timeline that has never wavered, and why the window for action is narrowing in ways that create pressure toward urgency rather than patience. I'm going to reveal what Russia is deploying into the Pacific, including a weapon system designed not to destroy ships, but to destroy coastlines, and why Japan's northern border has become a theater of nuclear intimidation. I'm going to explain Japan's transformation from a nation that constitutionally renounced war in 1945 to a nation that is now deploying lasers, ordering cruise missiles, testing railguns, and spending more on defense than at any point since World War II, and why that transformation is both the solution to the crisis and potentially its trigger. And I'm going to give you the strategic paradox at the heart of everything happening in the Pacific right now. A paradox that every military planner in Washington, Tokyo, and Beijing understands, but that nobody has solved. Subscribe to join the community. Leave a comment so we can keep the conversation going. And share this video because what is unfolding in the Pacific is not a future scenario. It is a present reality. The weapons are being deployed, the alliances are being forged, the timelines are converging, and the window that determines whether deterrence holds or whether the most consequential conflict since World War II begins, is closing. Let me start where this story truly starts. Not with Japan's laser test, not with Russian bombers over the Sea of Japan, with a single man's obsession and a deadline that has never wavered. Xi Jinping does not hide his ambitions in speech after speech, in official Communist Party documents, in directives handed down through the People's Liberation Army. The message is consistent and chilling. Taiwan must be reunified with the mainland. This is described as the essence of China's national revival, the core interest that supersedes all other interests, the objective that the Communist Party's legitimacy and Xi's personal legacy depends on achieving. And in Xi's worldview, this goal must be achieved by 2049. The 100th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China, 2049. 23 years from today. That sounds like a long time. It isn't. Because the military establishment in Beijing is not waiting until 2049. According to Admiral Philip Davidson, former commander of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, China could be ready to pursue its Taiwan objective as early as 2027. 2027, next year. That assessment, the Davidson window, as it has come to be known, has shaped American and Japanese defense planning for years. Every procurement decision, every deployment order, every alliance negotiation, every weapons development program, all of it calibrated against a timeline that gives the Pacific democracies months, not decades, to prepare. And the infrastructure China has built tells you how seriously Beijing takes that timeline. 134 air bases within 1,000 nautical miles of Taiwan, 650 hardened aircraft shelters, reinforced blast-resistant structures designed to protect combat aircraft from the kind of preemptive strikes that would otherwise destroy an air force on the ground. This is not a country that is bluffing. Countries that bluff don't build 650 hardened shelters. Countries that bluff don't spend hundreds of billions on purpose-built invasion infrastructure. Countries that are bluffing find cheaper ways to make threats. China is spending the money, building the infrastructure, training the forces, deploying the weapons. And Taiwan's own defense ministry is operating under no illusions about what the opening hours would look like. Taiwanese officials have issued assessments describing a scenario that military planners call the first 60 minutes, the period that determines whether Taiwan survives long enough to fight or whether it is functionally neutralized before resistance can organize. The first wave would not come with soldiers on beaches. It would come from the sky, between 5,000 and 10,000 missiles launched simultaneously in the first hour, before a single ship leaves a Chinese port, before a single transport aircraft takes off. The objective is brutal in its simplicity: destroy Taiwan's radars, flatten its airfields, knock out its command centers, sever its communications, blind the island completely, all within 60 minutes. Shock and awe on a scale never seen before, not as a prelude to invasion, as the precondition for invasion, because an island that cannot see, cannot communicate, and cannot launch aircraft is an island that cannot resist an amphibious force crossing 100 miles of open water. Beijing has purpose-built its arsenal for exactly this mission. The DF-15 and DF-16 short-range ballistic missiles, specifically designed to strike Taipei and its military installations. Hundreds of them, pre-targeted, pre-programmed, ready to launch on order. The CJ-10 cruise missile, low-flying, high-speed, capable of threading through mountainous terrain using terrain-following radar to find targets that ballistic missiles cannot reach. Command bunkers built into mountains. Communications nodes hidden in valleys. The targets that survive the ballistic missile barrage. And then there is the DF-21D, the weapon that American naval planners lose sleep over, specifically engineered to sink U.S. aircraft carriers. A medium-range ballistic missile with a maneuverable re-entry vehicle designed to hit a moving ship at sea. China calls it the carrier killer. Military analysts call it a game changer. Because if it works, if a salvo of DF-21Ds can credibly threaten a carrier strike group at ranges of 1,500 kilometers, then American naval power cannot approach the Taiwan Strait during the critical opening phase of a conflict. The carriers that are supposed to provide air superiority, that are supposed to protect the island, that are supposed to deter invasion, those carriers become targets rather than protectors. That is the threat. That is what the Pacific democracies are racing to counter. And that race is producing weapons and alliances that would have been unimaginable a decade ago. But Taiwan has not been sitting still. And what Taiwan is building deserves attention, because it changes the invasion calculus in ways that Beijing cannot ignore. In recent months, Taiwan received its first Harpoon coastal defense systems. And the delivery was not symbolic. It was substantial: 100 launchers, 400 land-based RGM-84L4 Harpoon Block II anti-ship missiles, forming the backbone of a new coastal warfare command scheduled to become fully operational on January 1st, 2026. This is not a marginal upgrade. It is a structural shift in how Taiwan plans to fight. Under the old doctrine, Taiwan's defense was centralized. Commands flowed from Taipei. Decisions were made at headquarters. If headquarters was destroyed, which is exactly what China's opening missile barrage is designed to achieve, the entire defensive response could be paralyzed. The Coastal Warfare Command changes that equation. Local commanders, stationed at distributed sites along Taiwan's coastline, are equipped with anti-ship missiles and the authority to use them. They do not wait for orders from Taipei. They act on their own judgment. If a Chinese naval vessel appears in their engagement zone, they fire. This is decentralized defense, the kind that cannot be decapitated by destroying a single command center, because there is no single command center. There are dozens of autonomous firing positions, each capable of engaging Chinese naval forces independently. The Harpoon Block II missiles incorporate inertial and GPS navigation derived from JDAM targeting kits and software from the SLAM-ER program. They are specifically hardened to operate in electronic warfare environments, the kind of signal jamming battlefield that China's PLA has trained to create. And the coastal defense systems serve a second purpose beyond anti-ship warfare. They complicate China's ability to sever Taiwan's undersea fiber optic cables, the communications arteries that connect the island to the world. In a conflict, those cables are among the first targets. Cut the cables and Taiwan is isolated. Its government can't communicate with allies. Its military can't coordinate with foreign partners. Its population can't access outside information. The Coastal Warfare Command's distributed missile batteries make approaching Taiwan's coastline for cable-cutting operations or any other purpose dramatically more dangerous for Chinese naval assets. China's invasion plan has become significantly more expensive to execute. That is the goal. Not to match China's military strength. Taiwan can't do that, and nobody pretends otherwise. But to make the cost of invasion so high, the losses so severe, the timeline so extended, that Beijing concludes the price is not worth paying. Now let me show you the northern dimension of this crisis. Because Japan is not just watching what happens across the Taiwan Strait. Japan is watching what happens directly above its own territory. August 19th, 2025. Russia's Ministry of Defense confirmed that two Tu-95MS nuclear-capable strategic bombers, escorted by Su-35S and Su-30SM fighter jets, conducted a 6-hour patrol over the Sea of Japan. The Kremlin described it as a routine long-range aviation mission. The timing was anything but routine. The patrol came precisely as the United States and South Korea were conducting large-scale joint military exercises. The message was deliberate, calculated, designed to land with maximum psychological impact at maximum political sensitivity. And this was not a one-time event. In January 2025, 4 Tu-95MS bombers conducted a provocative patrol near Hokkaido, Japan's northernmost major island. These flights form a pattern, a drumbeat, a rhythmic reminder that Tokyo sits within range of nuclear weapons carried by aircraft that can launch their missiles without ever entering Japanese airspace. The Tu-95MS, NATO designation Bear H, carries KH-101 nuclear-capable cruise missiles, range exceeding 2,500 kilometers. A Bear H flying in international airspace over the Sea of Japan can launch missiles that reach any target in Japan. Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya, every military installation, every industrial complex, every population center, without the aircraft ever crossing into Japan's sovereign airspace. Japan's Air Self-Defense Force scrambled F-15J interceptors to shadow the formation as it entered Japan's air defense identification zone. The fighters flew alongside the Russian bombers, close enough to see the pilots, close enough to photograph the weapons pylons, close enough to confirm what was hanging beneath the wings. Russia walked right up to the line and stared. The message from Moscow is explicit. Japan supports Ukraine with money, with materials, with diplomatic isolation of Russia through the G7. Moscow views Japan's support as hostile action, and Russia is reminding Japan through the language of nuclear-capable bomber patrols that Tokyo sits well within range. This creates what defense analysts describe as a two-front pressure campaign against Japan. China threatening from the south, Russia probing from the north. For a nation that constitutionally renounced war in 1945, a nation whose identity for 8 decades has been defined by its rejection of military power as a tool of policy, it is an extraordinary position to be in. And then there is the weapon that most people don't want to talk about, because talking about it requires confronting a reality that doesn't fit neatly into the categories of conventional military analysis. On November 1st, 2025, Russia launched a new submarine. Not a conventional attack vessel, not a ballistic missile submarine of the kind that has existed for decades. The Khabarovsk Project 09851, a nuclear-powered special-purpose submarine designed from scratch around a single weapon system, the Poseidon, Designation 2M39, an autonomous nuclear-powered underwater drone between 65 and 80 feet long, operating at depths of up to 3,000 feet, at speeds estimated around 70 knots, faster than any torpedo, faster than any submarine, faster than any surface ship. At those depths and speeds, the Poseidon is effectively uninterceptable. No current anti-submarine warfare system is designed to engage a target moving at 70 knots at 3,000 feet. The physics of underwater detection and engagement don't support it. The Poseidon moves through the ocean in a domain where nothing can catch it and nothing can stop it. In October 2025, Putin personally announced a successful test of the Poseidon's nuclear power unit. Russia had, for the first time, managed to launch the weapon from a carrier submarine and activate its nuclear power system under operational conditions. The Poseidon is not designed to destroy a ship. It is not designed to sink a carrier. It is not designed to attack a military installation. It is designed to destroy a coast. Equipped with a nuclear warhead, estimated between 2 and 100 megatons depending on the source, it is built to detonate near a shoreline. The detonation generates a massive radioactive tsunami, a wall of irradiated water that crashes into coastal infrastructure, flooding cities, contaminating land, rendering inhabited coastline uninhabitable for generations. Not years, generations. Russia is moving this capability into the Pacific. The Khabarovsk, carrying 6 Poseidon drones, will operate in the same waters where Russian bomber patrols already probe Japanese airspace. The strategic signal could not be clearer. If you intervene in our interests, we can flood your cities, not with troops, not with missiles, with water, radioactive water, moving at the speed of a tsunami and carrying the contamination of a nuclear weapon. This is the environment Japan has woken up inside. Nuclear-capable bombers to the north, an invasion threat to the south, and an underwater weapon designed to make coastlines uninhabitable deployed into the waters off its shores. And here is where it becomes genuinely remarkable. Because Japan's response is not panic. It is not accommodation. It is not the kind of diplomatic hedging that nations employ when they hope threats will go away if they're polite enough. Japan's response is transformation. For 7 decades, Japan operated under the constraints of its pacifist constitution. Article 9, the clause that formally renounced the right of belligerency, the clause that was treated as near sacred, defining Japan's international identity as a peaceful trading nation that had learned the lessons of its imperial past. Defense spending was capped at 1% of GDP. Japan could defend itself, barely symbolically, but it could not project power. It could not strike first. It could not develop offensive weapons. It could not do what every other major nation does, maintain a military capable of deterring threats through the credible promise of retaliation. That framework is now being systematically dismantled, not abandoned, not repealed, dismantled, piece by piece, capability by capability, budget line by budget line, with the precision of a nation that understands exactly what it's building and exactly why it needs to build it. Japan's defense spending has risen for 13 consecutive years. The FY 2026 defense plan, released in late December 2025, sets expenditures at approximately 8.7 trillion yen, roughly $56 billion, approximately 2% of GDP. Since 1976, no Japanese government had breached the 1% ceiling. The ceiling that said, we will never again be a military power. We will never again threaten our neighbors. We will never again be the nation that the world fears. That ceiling is gone. Prime Minister Sei Takaichi personally advanced the 2% target by 2 full years ahead of schedule. Not because she wanted to, because the strategic environment left no other option. China to the south, Russia to the north, nuclear threats from both directions, and an ally, the United States, whose commitment to Japan's defense, while strong, depends on American political will that cannot be guaranteed from one administration to the next. Japan is building the capability to defend itself, with or without American assistance, against threats that are no longer theoretical. And what the money is buying is extraordinary. Start with cruise missiles. Japan signed a $1.7 billion contract with the United States for 400 Tomahawk cruise missiles, Block 4 and Block 5 variants, range 1,600 kilometers, 1,600 kilometers. That is the distance from Tokyo to Shanghai, from Okinawa to the Chinese mainland, from Japanese waters to targets deep inside the territory of any adversary in the region. Japan has never possessed this capability before. For 8 decades, Japan could only defend, could only absorb strikes and attempt to intercept incoming weapons. It could not strike back. It could not hold an adversary's territory at risk. It could not say, if you hit us, we will hit you back harder. Now it can. 3 Japanese Aegis destroyers, Chokai, Haguro, and Kuroshima, have already been modified to launch Tomahawks. 2 more, Maya and Atago, are being fitted in fiscal year 2026. 5 destroyers, 400 cruise missiles, the ability to hit targets 1,000 miles away while the launching ships remain safely beyond enemy weapons range. That is a counterstrike capability. Japan now has it. But Tomahawks are just the beginning, because Tomahawks are subsonic. They fly at the speed of a commercial airliner against modern air defenses, the kind China has spent decades building around its naval task forces. A subsonic cruise missile is increasingly vulnerable. So Japan is building something faster. The improved Type 12 surface-to-ship missile, ground-launched, ship-launched, and submarine-launched variants. The ground-launched version, tested successfully in the United States in October 2024 and again in summer 2025, has a range exceeding 1,000 kilometers. From deployment sites on Kyushu alone, parts of China and North Korea already fall within striking range. Beyond that, Japan is developing 2 hypersonic weapons programs. The hypervelocity gliding projectile, a boost glide weapon designed for island defense that completed its final test launches in summer 2025, and a separate hypersonic cruise missile platform flying beyond Mach 5. Mach 5. 5 times the speed of sound. At that velocity, current air defense systems cannot intercept. The engagement window is too short. The tracking requirements exceed what existing radar can provide. The missile arrives before the defense can react. These weapons are designed to defeat the dense air defense umbrellas that China has constructed around its naval task forces. The defenses that would otherwise protect a Chinese invasion fleet as it crossed the Taiwan Strait. Japan is building the capability to engage that fleet from 1,000 kilometers away at speeds that the fleet's defenses cannot counter, with weapons that can be launched from ships, from submarines, and from mobile ground launchers that can relocate between firings. And now, the laser, the weapon that changes the economics of warfare in ways that missiles and guns and bombs cannot. On December 2, 2025, Japan's Ministry of Defense confirmed that a 100 kilowatt class high-energy laser system has been installed aboard the experimental test ship JS Asuka at the Inoshima shipyard. This system has been in development since 2018 under Japan's Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics Agency, ATLA. The technology combines domestically produced 10 kilowatt fiber lasers into a single focused 100 kilowatt beam, housed in 2 40-foot containerized units, produced by Kawasaki Heavy Industries. 100 kilowatts is the threshold at which directed energy becomes militarily useful against hardened targets. Below that, you can dazzle sensors and blind optics. At 100 kilowatts, you can burn through drone airframes, destroy missile seeker heads, disable incoming cruise missiles. But here's what makes this system fundamentally different from every other weapon Japan is deploying. Different from Tomahawks, different from Harpoons, different from hypersonic missiles. The math. A Patriot missile costs between $3 and $4 million per shot. A Standard Missile 3 used for ballistic missile defense costs even more. These are the weapons that currently defend ships and installations against incoming threats. Expensive weapons, weapons that exist in finite quantities, weapons that run out. When China plans to flood the battle space with thousands of cheap drones and cruise missiles in the opening hours of a Taiwan conflict, when the strategy is saturation, when the objective is to overwhelm the defense through sheer volume, a missile-based defense has a fundamental structural problem. You run out of interceptors before the attacker runs out of drones. You simply cannot buy enough expensive missiles to shoot down enough cheap drones. The economics don't work. Every $3 million interceptor that destroys a $50,000 drone is a financial victory for the attacker and a financial catastrophe for the defender. Multiply by thousands, and the defense goes bankrupt before the offense runs out of ammunition. A laser fires at the cost of electricity. As ATLA stated in program documents, So long as sufficient electrical power is available, the system can continue engaging threats without running out of ammunition. Without running out of ammunition. In a conflict defined by volume, by the sheer number of incoming threats, a weapon that cannot run out of ammunition is not just an advantage, it is a revolution. Ground-based testing against small drones and live mortar rounds has confirmed the system's destructive capability. Sea trials aboard JS Asuka are scheduled to begin after February 27, 2026. Live fire tests against drone targets are being contracted. And Japan is not alone in deploying directed energy in the Pacific. The U.S. Navy has forward deployed the laser-armed destroyer USS Preble to Japan since October 2024. Equipped with a 60-kilowatt Helios system fully integrated into the Aegis combat system. The United States and Japan are now operating directed energy weapons side by side in the Pacific against the threat environment that China's drone and missile programs have created. Japan is also advancing an electromagnetic railgun program. ATLA conducted the world's first successful ship-mounted railgun firing test from June to early July 2025. A projectile fired at a real ship target. Japan's future 13DDX destroyer class is planned to carry both railguns and high-powered lasers. A single destroyer capable of firing railgun projectiles at Mach 6, fast enough to engage hypersonic threats. The very threats that China is building. This is not incremental improvement. This is not a modest upgrade to existing capability. This is a fundamental redesign of how Japan intends to fight, from a nation that renounced fighting, in response to threats that make renunciation suicidal. Now let me show you the alliance architecture, because Japan is not acting alone, and the coalition being built across the Indo-Pacific is perhaps the most important strategic development of all. U.S. Marines equipped with anti-ship missiles have been stationed on the remote islands of Okinawa, turning the first island chain, the string of islands from Japan through Taiwan to the Philippines, into what analysts describe as a fortified maritime barrier, a wall that China's Navy cannot breach without catastrophic losses. Japan's deployment of Type 03 medium-range surface-to-air missiles on Yonaguni Island, confirmed in November 2025, places air defense batteries on Japan's westernmost territory, just 110 kilometers from Taiwan's eastern coast, interlocking with PAC-3 Patriot units on Miyako Island, and Aegis destroyers operating in adjacent waters. These systems create overlapping engagement zones from Taiwan to Okinawa. Chinese air and naval forces cannot operate freely in that corridor. Australia, long content to maintain cautious neutrality toward China, while sheltering beneath the U.S. security umbrella, announced in August 2025 that it had ordered 11 improved Mogami-class frigates from Japan's Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. Australia is simultaneously building nuclear-powered submarines under the AUKUS agreement with the United States and the United Kingdom. Virginia-class boats that will patrol the Indo-Pacific and provide alliance partners with deep-water strike options that China cannot easily counter.